The title of the presentation is Reconciling Performance with Progress, Business Performance with Societal Progress. And you see the question mark there. So what's going on? What's going on is there's been this amazing convergence of large trends. I'm hardly the first one to observe them. One trend has been written about by a famous academic named Karl Polanyi, who wrote a book in the 1950s called The Great Transformation. And what he said is, the market has pushed out society. Over the last 100 years, last 150 years, society has been displaced by the market. A second trend, which has been observed by sociologist John Coleman, he said, 100 years ago, we were mostly natural persons, individuals, families. Now, we are mostly corporate persons. Corporate actors, juristic actors, have displaced natural actors. They've displaced individuals, families, even government and God. A third development over the last century, money has displaced meaning. And somewhere in here, we're wondering, what is the role and responsibility of business in these developments? These developments make us unhappy, unsatisfied. Is this kind of progress that we want? And it is against that kind of background that I came to this question of, can we reconcile business performance with societal progress, or are we condemned to make a trade-off? Now, as I was doing this research, I started to discover a whole host of enterprises. All of these are familiar names to you. I'll just run through a couple. Take Pepsi. So about 10 years ago, 14 years ago to be more precise, Pepsi started to focus on health issues. And they started to talk publicly about obesity. If you go to the Pepsi website, the CEO's message says, today there are 1 billion people who are considered overweight in the world. 300 million are clinically obese. As CEO of Pepsi, I'm trying to understand, what should Pepsi do about this? We are in the nutrition business. We are a marketing company. What can we do about this? And Pepsi started a program of divestiture, and they divested from a $30 billion company, they divested $17 billion of businesses. Can you imagine? They sold Kentucky Fried Chicken, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, and they said, these businesses are not illegal, but these are not necessarily the businesses we want to be in. And they started to acquire Tropicana orange juice, Quaker oats, and natural snack foods, etc. That's one example. Health. Another example is GE. So a big challenge for the world is H2O, water. We know that population is rising, and we know that where population is rising, water may be a challenge. And GE has committed itself to being part of the answer through a very imperfect technology, desalination. But GE Water today has 10,000 employees, $2.5 billion in revenue. And here's an organization that is saying, we know what's coming, and maybe we should try, however imperfectly, however we are criticized. We are not a perfect company, but let's try and see if we can do something about the water challenge. And GE today is the world leader in this. In the Middle East, in North Africa, in California. It's a lot of controversy, but GE is hanging in there. And they're not making return on capital. They do not publish this, but they are not making return on capital in the water business. And we know GE is a high-performance company. Toyota, everybody knows Toyota. When they introduced the hybrid more than 12 years ago, this was not where the fashion was, but Toyota saw climate change, transportation. So basically, people are saying, hey, wait, there is a problem with business. We can criticize business. Here's a man some of you might recognize, Diamond Jared. So Jared Diamond wrote this book about guns and germs, and he's a geographer at UCLA. And he wrote recently in the New York Times, businesses are going to play as much or more of a role in our progress as the government. So this realization that we can't maybe do without businesses, and this got me thinking, so what's really going on here? because the issue is these actions are more than symbolic. Normally, you say, well, companies are making too much money, they need to cover up, they need to have some greenwash. They need to have one or two products. But these are more than symbolic actions. We're talking about 10,000 people, we're talking about billions of dollars. And this is not the usual greenwash. So I started thinking, three things. One, as a strategy professor, we care about inflection points. Andy Grove from Intel told us, if you miss the inflection point, you are likely to regret. Is this an inflection point? Just when we think business is plateauing out, is there in the 21st century a new kind of business? Secondly, what does this mean for leadership? And thirdly, for me most interesting, from an academic point of view, what does this mean for capitalism? This is a relatively young idea. It is an imperfect idea. What do these trends at the fringe? This is happening at the fringe. 99% of firms are not doing such things. But what does this mean if these firms become the dominant model going forward? So I started to grapple with these, and it took me back to kind of asking the question, so what is capitalism anyhow? It's a big idea, seems to be an important idea. It's a new idea. What does it mean? Well, it means two things. It means many things, but if I were to reduce, I would reduce it to two things. One, perhaps most importantly, capitalism is about property rights. And capitalism is about private property. So there are multiple Nobel Prizes awarded to this. Douglas North is one of the people in the last 30 years who has told us the wealth of nations comes from property rights. A second idea that capitalism is about the price mechanism. It's about markets sending price signals, and so here's another Nobel laureate, Friedrich Hayek, who told us knowledge is dispersed in society, and the most efficient way to gather this knowledge is through the price mechanism. No computer, no omniscient planner, because it's always changing. And the price mechanism can change. It's a very, very powerful idea. So what is capitalism? It's two ideas. It's property rights that drive incentives. Limited liability, so there's a floor on what I can lose, and there's a big upside because I own the property right. If this works out, I can do well. So I have an incentive to give creativity and to give effort. And on the other hand, it's the price mechanism which brings me the information. So that's what capitalism is. Very, very parsimonious, wonderful endogenous system. Incentives and information, and you can have an economy. Now, what are these firms doing that might be either adding or changing to this? Well, they're firstly understanding that as much as we like the theory of prices and property rights, both of them have problems. We've seen some of the incentive problems in the financial sector recently. But look at the price problem. The price problem is huge. What is the price of health? We can't agree. It's an imperfect thing. What is the price of clean air 100 years from now for my great-grandchildren? We can't agree. And there are overshooting. What is the price of real estate? Well, we thought the price mechanism said it, but in fact, it was wrong. Prices are manipulated. Price fixing. We have a Federal Reserve that sets the price of money. Prices are not just coming endogenously. We have reified the price mechanism, and it doesn't capture all the things we necessarily care about. When I go to Dunkin' Donuts and I buy a honey-glazed chocolate donut and a medium coffee, I might pay $3, but I'm paying a lot more, and it's not in the price mechanism. So these guys are saying we need something beyond information, beyond incentives. And what is that something? What is it that the Toyotas of the world, the GE Water, the Pepsi Health, what are those leaders bringing? Here's what I think they're bringing. They're saying we need to complement information and incentives with a third factor of production, imagination. And where is this imagination coming from? This imagination comes from a pain point. Society has a pain point. It could be climate change. It could be water. It could be health and obesity. It could be gender disparity. There are any number of pain points in society, and what these guys are saying is we can use the ought to be standard in guiding our imagination. How is the world today, and how ought it to be? This is the standard of imagination. This is the meaning of progress, when you can close the gap between how the world is and take it one more step towards how the world ought to be. That's the standard, the imagination standard, that these organizations are using. This is why these companies are, I think, doing something different. The word imagination now, in the last 10 years, is in GE's logo. They call it imagination at work. They call it eco-imagination, right? If you think about this man, Mr. Watanabe, who was the former CEO of Toyota, he goes to a conference on emissions, and people are talking about reducing particulate emissions. And they're saying we should go from 150 to 120 by 2015, and then we should go to 100. And Mr. Watanabe comes up and he says, can you imagine if cars are air purifiers? That as we drive, not only we don't make emissions, we purify the air as we drive. Every car is an air purifier. Now, once you can imagine, of course you can make it happen. Once you can imagine that, we put a lander on Mars, we can surely make cars air purifiers. It's obligatory to have a photo of Einstein when you're saying something that you're not quite sure about. So here, Einstein cooperates. In Google Images, you can download all these nice things. So Einstein really said, imagination is more important than knowledge. Hayek was right. The price mechanism, knowledge in society, for which Hayek was given a Nobel Prize. Knowledge in society is dispersed. Imagination is even more important than knowledge. This is the photo of a political scientist, philosopher, Amy Gutmann. Amy Gutmann is a very, very erudite and prominent political scientist. She is currently the president of the University of Pennsylvania. She wrote an article on what is the purpose of education. And her argument is the whole purpose of education is to teach imagination, to imagine what can be, not only understand how the world is and how it works and what the ropes and routines are, but what the world can be. That is the power of education. And so again, to my friend Einstein, he says, imagination is everything. It is the preview of life's coming attractions, right? So, what about innovation? Isn't innovation imagination? Innovation is really important. Schumpeter, who did not win a Nobel Prize, he died too soon, he was a big agent of Schumpeterian innovation. Innovation is important, but innovation is about product and process innovation. Imagination is about goal innovation. What is the goal? Does that have a societal component in it? Can we recouple this mechanism called capitalism to society? Can we make a symbiosis between market and society? Schumpeterian entrepreneur starts with gain. My entrepreneur starts with pain. They look at the pain in society and say, can I now make a business out of that? So what about their performance? Are these people doing charity? No. There are three markets, all of which are showing tendencies to move. The product market, labor market, and capital market. In the product market, more and more we are seeing what is being called boycotting. There used to be boycotting, and now there's boycotting. A higher willingness to pay on the part of customers for firms that are doing the right thing. In the labor market, if you go to any young campus and you ask where students want to work, you go to recruiters and you say, I have top talent. If Google wants to attract top talent, they better have something to do with the societal pain point. The labor market is moving in that direction. People want meaning, not only money. And companies that understand this and can use the imagination, they are able to attract that. And what's happening in the capital market? This supposedly rational, maybe not so rational market. Well, I've just been working with a professor called Harrison Hong from Princeton, who is a specialist in finance. And he's been doing research and looking at the empirical patterns. Unlike me, he is agnostic. And he says, I just look at the data, what's happening in the American capital markets. And what he sees is an unmistakable tendency, not only for those who call themselves socially responsible investing, but 50% of the mutual funds are boycotting so-called industries, which are the bad industries. The capital markets are suddenly starting to put a premium on companies that are thinking about society, that are thinking about sustainability, and this is showing up in the price-earnings ratios and in the portfolio holdings. Okay? You should go and visit Harrison Hong's website at Princeton. What does this mean for leadership? I have two questions to ask you. One, as leaders, what is your IQ? You know by this I mean, what is your imagination quotient? Are you imagining or are you only executing? Secondly, are you going to be an agent of progress, or will we, as previous leaders, be condemned to be slaves of success? This is the real choice that faces us in this region and all over the world, whether it is regarding climate change, whether it is regarding income inequality, whether it is regarding unemployment among the youth. We need imagination. Okay? And what's the conclusion I'm drawing from this? So I think we are moving the paradigm of capitalism. I think practice is moving it. Academics like me will be writing about it. Part of the research I'm doing is trying to study these agents of progress. Why did Ratan Tata think that way? And what is it we're moving? In the 20th century, we've had an instrumental capitalism. And in the 21st century, what I perceive, and I will share with you today, is we are shifting this paradigm to a substantive capitalism. We are moving from an instrumental capitalism, self-regarding, to a substantive capitalism which couples the market to society. Not only incentives, not only information. This is a great model. They have virtues. The decentralized system is great, but we need to bring in the third factor of production, imagination. And yes, I do think from a strategy point of view, there is an inflection point here with implications for business models, leadership, and business performance.